France-India relations have traditionally been close and friendly. Both nations have a centuries-old history of trade relations. For the 17th century until 1954, France maintained a colonial presence in the subcontinent. Puducherry, one of its former Indian territories, is a popular tourism destination for French travelers to India. With the establishment of the strategic partnership in 1998, there has been a significant progress in all areas of bilateral cooperation through regular high-level exchanges at the head of state, head of government levels, and growing commercial exchanges including in strategic areas such as defense, nuclear energy and space. France was the first country with which India entered into an agreement on nuclear energy following the waiver given by International Atomic Energy Agency and the Nuclear Suppliers Group, enabling India to resume full civil nuclear cooperation with the international community. There is also a growing and wide-ranging cooperation in areas such as trade and investment, culture, science and technology and education. France has consistently supported India's permanent membership of the UNSC. Both India and France are proponents of a multipolar world led by regional democracies. History. In the 17th century, François Bernier, a French physician and traveller, became for 12 years the personal physician of the Mughal Emperor Aurangzeb. In the 18th century, France was actively involved in the European colonial power play in the Indian Ocean region. The French General Dupleix was allied to Mirza Fakhr in the Deccan, and Chanda Sahib in the Carnatic Wars, in the conflict against Robert Clive of the East India Company. These relationships were beneficial to the French, and French allies gifted areas such as the Alamperi fort in return for the services provided by the French against the British. The French succeeded in the 1746 Battle of Madras, and the French and Indians fought together and vanquished Tanwadin in 1749, but failed in the Battle of Arcot in 1751 and finally surrendered in 1752. The French again had a success at the capture of Fort St. David in 1758, under Lally, but were finally defeated at Machilipatnam and Vandavazi. The French military adventurer and mercenary, Benoit de Boyne, made his name in India under the Marathas, whom he assisted in many battles against the British East India Company. French had lost preeminence in India with the Treaty of Paris, although 5 trading posts were being maintained there, leaving opportunities for disputes and power play with Great Britain. France was successful in supporting the American War of Independence in 1776, and wished to expel the British from India as well. In 1782, Louis XVI sealed an alliance with the Maratha Peshwa Madhavrao. As a consequence, Bastille moved his troops to Ile-de-France and later contributed to the French effort in India in 1783. Suffren became the ally of Hyder Ali in the Second Anglo-Mysore War against British rule in India. In 1782 to 1783, fighting the British fleet on the coasts of India and Ceylon. Between February 1782 until June 1783, Suffren fought the English Admiral Sir Edward Hughes and collaborated with the rulers of Mysore. An army of 3,000 French soldiers collaborated with Hyder Ali to capture Cuddalore, while Great Britain established its authority over the Madras Presidency. France retained control of Pondicherry, Karaikal, Janam, and Mahé, as well as maintaining a foothold in Chandanagar, now in West Bengal. During the British Raj, many Indian freedom fighters sought refuge in French establishments in India to stay out of reach of the British. India in World World War I and World War II. Indian Expeditionary Force A, Indian Army Service Corps and Imperial Service troops contributed to defend France during World War I and World War II. Darwan Singh Negi, Gabbar Singh Negi, Gobind Singh Rathore and Mir Dast were awarded the Victoria Cross for exceptional gallantry on French battlefields. Flight Lieutenant Hardat Singh Malik of No. 28 Squadron RFC flew as op with Camel over France during World War I. Some of the more prominent battles involving troops from the Indian subcontinent: Battle of Neuve-Chapelle, Battle of Armentières, First Battle of Ypres, Battle of the Somme, Battle of Loos, Battle of Bazentin, Battle of Le Bastille, Battle of Flers-Courcelette, Battle of Festabat, Battle of Aubers Ridge, Battle of Cambrai, the advance to the Hindenburg Line, First Battle of Champagne. The British Raj and princely states of India suffered the greatest World War I casualties amongst dominions, colonies, protectorates, mandates and other territories of the British Empire. It is estimated that between 64,449 and 73,895 Indians died in Europe during the First World War. Of the 130,000 Indians who served in Somme and Flanders theatre of operations during World War I, almost 9,000 died. According to the Commonwealth War Graves Commission, 8,128 graves of soldiers of the British Indian Army and porters of the Indian Labour Corps who perished in World War I and World War II are located in France. Marshal Ferdinand Foch, the French commander at the Battle of Neuve-Chapelle, acknowledged the contribution of troops from India and said, "Return to your homes in the distant, sun-bathed East and proclaim how your countrymen drenched with the blood the cold northern land of France and Flanders, how they delivered it by their ardent spirit from the firm grip of a determined enemy. Tell all India that we shall watch over the graves with the devotion due to all our dead. We shall cherish above all the memory of their example. They showed us the way. They made the first steps towards the final victory. Due to Hindu funeral rites where mortal remains are cremated, most Indian casualties are commemorated with inscriptions on war memorials at Neuve-Chapelle Indian Memorial and the Anneau de la Mémoire of Notre-Dame de Lorette at Blaine Street, Nazaire French Military Cemetery rather than with individual graves. At Indian and Chinese Cemetery, La Chapelette British and Indian Cemetery, Neuville-sous-Montreuil Indian Cemetery, Gore British and Indian Cemetery, Zelobes Indian Cemetery, Étaples Military Cemetery, St. Martin-les-Boulogne Murat Military Cemetery, Cabaret Rouge British Cemetery, Bethune Town Cemetery, Arcs-les-Batailles British Cemetery and Mizargues War Cemetery. Marseille are examples of military cemeteries which contain graves or memorials to Indian casualties in France. Dieppe Canadian War Cemetery contains the grave of Pilot Officer Dastour Rustam Nariman of the Royal Indian Air Force 12 SQDN. Colonial troops and labourers, including those from the Indian subcontinent, are collectively identified as Lascars in French military necropolis, as can be observed at Notre-Dame de Lorette at Blaine Street, Nazaire French Military Cemetery. A small number of Indians from French India, notably from Chandanagar, served as colonial infantrymen in the French army during World War I. The monument aux Morts in Puducherry was built in memory of colonial troops from French India. Puducherry responded to the June 1940 appeal by Charles de Gaulle and became the first French territory to abandon their collaborationist Vichy regime and join Free France. Cession of French territories in India. France established diplomatic relations with the newly independent India in 1947. An agreement between France and India in 1948 stipulated that the inhabitants of France's Indian possessions would choose the political future. A treaty of cession was signed by the two countries in May 1956. It was ratified by the French Parliament in May 1962. On August 16, 1962, India and France exchanged the instruments of ratification under which France ceded to India full sovereignty over the territories it held. Puducherry and the other enclaves of Karaikal, Mahe and Yanam came to be administered as the Union Territory of Puducherry from July 1, 1963. The merits and deficiencies of French colonial presence in India is disputed on accounts of the exploitative nature of colonial trade, segregation of French subjects within the colonial possessions along ethnic lines, and the colonial use of indenture labor. Development of bilateral relations. The bilateral relations with France, although globally positive, fluctuated in function of defense sales to Pakistan and were offset by especially strong relations in the fields of civil nuclear energy and aerospace. Visits by head of state and head of government. A key milestone in the bilateral relationship was the visit in 1998 by President Jacques Chirac. The visit elevated the relationship through the signing of India's first-ever strategic partnership. In January 2008, President Nicolas Sarkozy visited India and was the chief guest at India's Republic Day parade. In September 2008, Indian Prime Minister Manmohan Singh made a major visit to France. On the 14th of July 2009, Prime Minister of India Manmohan Singh was the guest of honor for the Bastille Day celebrations held in Paris. The 2009 Bastille Day military parade opened with a contingent of Indian troops drawn from the three services. Soldiers including Jawans of Maratha Light Infantry Regiment sent a march down the Avenue Champs-Élysées to the sound of an Indian military band, playing Indian martial tunes including Sara Jahan Shecha, Haste Lasha and Kadam Kadam Badaya. French President Sarkozy undertook his second visit to India from 4 to 7 December 2010. French President François Hollande visited India on 14-15 February 2013. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi was in Paris on 10-11 April 2015 for strategic bilateral discussions with French President François Hollande. A joint status report established the current state of the bilateral relationship and plans for the future through the April 2015 India-France joint statement. On the 30th of November 2015, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi travelled to France for a two-day visit to attend the COP21 2015 United Nations Climate Change Conference in Paris. Narendra Modi and François Hollande jointly invited over 100 world leaders to join INSPIRE, a global initiative to promote low-carbon renewable solar energy technologies. January 2016 visit by French President François Hollande. A French delegation headed by President François Hollande and including several French cabinet ministers traveled to India on January 24, 2016 for a three-day visit. Speaking at the Indo-French CEOs Forum and the India-France Business Summit in Chandigarh on 24 January 2016, President François Hollande set the tone for the visit by stating his intentions. My visit has two main goals: consolidate the strategic partnership with India and implement decisions taken during Prime Minister Narendra Modi's visit to France. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi reciprocated by declaring that India and France are made for each other. The trust and friendship with France is an asset for us, and by emphasizing the need to consolidate people-to-people ties between India and France, our strategic partnership is not just between Paris and New Delhi. It is with each and every one of you. French President François Hollande was the chief guest at the 67th Indian Republic Day Parade in New Delhi on January 26, 2016. France is the only country to be invited a record-setting 5 times to the highly symbolic national ceremonial event. The 2016 Indian Republic Day Parade included the first-ever participation of foreign troops in the march past. 124 French Army soldiers from the 35th Infantry Regiment of the 7th Armoured Brigade based in Belfort and a ceremonial military band music contingent based in Lyon marched down Rajpath in New Delhi. U.S. President Barack Obama was the chief guest of the 2015 Republic Day Parade. The visit gained favorable media coverage which underscored the consistently cordial and exceptional nature of Indo-French bilateral relations and decoded the political significance of the protocol courtesies extended to France. Leading Indian newspapers published editorials lauding successful bilateral cooperation in the domains of science and AMP technology, aerospace, nuclear energy, defense and counter-terrorism. Kanwal Sibal, the former Foreign Secretary of India and who had also been India's ambassador to France, opined. He recognizes the esteem India has for France and the growing affinity between the two countries. Hollande attaches value to the personal rapport he has developed with Modi, recognizes the dynamism he is imparting to the Indian economy and believes in the growing affinity between the two countries. On this basis, the Indo-French strategic tie should grow in strength. Strategic partnership. The strategic partnership has profited from sustained political investments made at the senior-most levels of decision-making. The long-standing relationship between France and India has resulted in extensive cooperation in the domains of aerospace and civil nuclear energy. Besides military matters, science and AMP technology cooperation, deep-rooted cultural ties, and a historically francophile literary and AMP fine arts community in India has provided solid foundations for the strategic relationship. In November 2011, the Foundation for National Security Research in New Delhi published India's Strategic Partners, a comparative assessment, and ranked India's top strategic partners with a score out of 90 points. Russia comes out on top with 62, followed by the United States, France, UK, Germany, and Japan. Voting patterns of France in the UN Security Council on matters of core interest to India has endeared the country as all-weather friend of India. France was one of the few nations who did not condemn India's nuclear tests in 1998 and has supported India's bid to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council as well as G8. France is one of the largest suppliers of nuclear fuel to India, and signed a framework agreement for civil nuclear cooperation in January 2008. After India's waiver from the Nuclear Suppliers Group, both nations signed an agreement that would pave the way for the sale of French-made nuclear reactors to India on the 30th of September 2008. France is a major supplier of military equipment to India. Procurement of Dassault Mirage 2000 fighter aircraft and a squadron of DCNS Scorpion-class submarines are examples of strategic defense acquisitions. The armed services of both nations conduct joint exercises on an annual basis. France and India also maintain a discreet, strategic dialogue that covers joint cooperation against terrorism. The strategic autonomy of the French Force de Frappe resonates well within Indian strategic circles. French overseas regions of Irkut Union and Mayotte establish French sovereign presence in the Indian Ocean. Irkut Union has a significant ethnic Indian population colloquially called Malbars, and which includes all réunions of Indian origin. Acute Union's location in the Indian Ocean makes France ideally positioned to leverage advantages of the Neighborhood First policy and Indian Ocean outreach priorities, which were announced by the government of Narendra Modi on the 20th of November 2015, a week after the attacks in Paris. French Minister Laurent Fabius visited New Delhi and met with Prime Minister Narendra Modi and Foreign Minister Sushma Swaraj. The talks centered around enhancing cooperation to fight terrorism, as well as preparations for the 2015 climate summit in Paris. After the meeting, Fabius stated that France and India were in the same boat with regards to terrorism, saying, "I want to say that France is grateful for tremendous support it has received from the international community, including Indian friends. We have a good cooperation with our Indian friends on this. I was discussing it this morning with Prime Minister Modi. We shall develop our cooperation institutional structure for dialogue. France and India have instituted a strategic dialogue at the level of national security advisors, whose 27th round of strategic dialogue was held in Paris on 12-13 January 2015. The last Foreign Office consultations at the level of foreign secretaries was held in Paris on 17 June 2013. Defense partnership and cooperation is built on historic French and Indian military interactions which stretch back to the Carnatic Wars. India was heavily involved in both World War I and World War II and suffered huge loss of lives on battlefields in France. A 400-strong contingent of the Indian Armed Forces led the Bastille Day Parade in 2009, for which the Prime Minister of India was the guest of honor. The first time ever that Indian troops took part in another country's National Day Parade. Under the framework of the structured talks under the Indo-French Defense Cooperation Agreement, several meetings on industrial collaboration and service exchanges are held regularly. The third meeting of the JWG on counter-terrorism was held in New Delhi on 19-20 November 2012. The 11th meeting of the Indo-French Research Forum was held in Paris from 17 to 19 December 2012. The 15th High-Level Committee for Defense Cooperation at the level of defense secretaries met in Paris on 12 January 2015. Indo-French Air Force exercise Garuda was held at Istres Air Base in France from 14 to 25 June 2010. Indo-French Joint Naval Exercise Varuna was held in the Mediterranean Sea off the port of Toulon from 19 to 22 July 2012. The first Indo-France Joint Army exercise, named Shakti, was conducted in India at Shobatya from 9 to 22 October 2011. In 2013, Army Chief General Bikram Singh visited Commandement des Forces Terrestres Land Forces Command in Lille and the French Military School at Draguignan. In 2015, Vice Admiral SPS Chima FOC in Sea West was hosted by the French Navy at Toulon. The Indo-French Joint Army exercise was held in Rajasthan, India from 19 to 21 January 2016. Trade and AMP investment. Indo-French bilateral trade has been growing, though it has still not reached the €12 billion target set by both the governments during the visit of the French president to India in January 2008. In 2011, bilateral trade had increased by 6% to €7.46 billion. In the first 10 months of 2012, there has been a decrease of 3.71% in the bilateral trade over the same period of 2011. Based on annual data, the Indian exports of services to France have shown a growth in the last 3 years, reaching €1.32 billion in 2011, while the imports from France fell to €0.66 billion in the same year. Foreign direct investment: France is the 9th largest foreign investor in India, with a cumulative investment of approximately $3 billion. The technical and financial collaborations approved with France number 952. Top sectors attracting FDI inflows from France are chemicals, cement and gypsum products, services sector, fuels and electrical equipments, and auto sector. There are about 800 French companies in India. In 2011, India was the 13th largest foreign investor in France in terms of project numbers. Indian investments in France have been growing, and Indian companies have invested around €1 billion from April 1996 in different sectors like pharmaceuticals, software, wine, steel, plastics, railway wagons, aerospace and auto parts, etc. 110 Indian-owned companies, including 27 greenfield investments, are present in France and are employing over 5,600 persons. The Indo-French CEOs Forum, formed in 2009, has been tasked to identify new avenues for cooperation and take initiatives to facilitate business links between both countries. The 16th session of the Joint Committee for Economic and Technical Cooperation, at the level of Ministers of Commerce, which deals with issues related to commerce and trade, was held on 23 to 25 June 2010 in Paris. The 5th meeting of India-France CEOs Forum was held in New Delhi on 22–23 November 2012. Aerospace Aviation: Indian companies are major clients for Airbus and ATR aircraft. Air India, Indigo Airlines, Jet Airways and AirAsia India host extensive fleets of Airbus passenger aircraft. France has been a long-standing and reliable supplier of fighter planes and light utility helicopters to the Indian Armed Services, with aircraft such as Breguet, Dassault Ouragan, Dassault Mystère IV, Seppacat Jaguar, Aerospatial SAR-315B Llama, Aerospatial Alouette 3 and Dassault Mirage 2000. France also supplies Turbomeca trademark 333 and jointly developed the HAL Turbomeca Shakti helicopter. Engines for HAL DHRUV, DRDO 3D multifunction control radar was developed as part of the Indian anti-ballistic missile program in cooperation with Thales of France. DCNS is building 6 Scorpene submarines of INS Cavalry class, which will be armed with ADM-39 Exocet anti-ship missiles, under a technology transfer agreement at Mazagon Docks in Mumbai. Dassault Rafale won the Indian MMRCA competition to supply 126 medium multi-role combat aircraft to the Indian Air Force. In April 2015, the inabilities to conclude negotiations on contractual obligations led the Modi government to transform the acquisition into a G2G procurement for 36 aircraft in flyaway condition to equip 3 squadrons of the Indian Air Force. Defense analysts have voiced concern that equipment procurement requirements, which were defined 2 decades ago, are out of sync with current requirements and the future nature of air combat. Air forces of advanced Western nations, especially US and France, are reorganizing their air forces with increase in space-based assets and downsizing of fleets of manned combat aircraft. Autonomous drones have become the preferred platform for high-risk missions over enemy territory in both high and low-intensity conflict zones. At present, NATO uses aerial reconnaissance drones to monitor the borders of Europe, and US uses maritime surveillance drones in the Western Pacific and unmanned combat drones in missions against low-value and unsophisticated targets in Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya and Syria. Defense white papers published in OECD countries show that use of combat and reconnaissance pilotless vehicles will become widespread in the years ahead. Space. ISRO and CNES have an umbrella agreement operating successfully since 1993, under which joint missions like Megatropics and SARAL have been successfully developed. ISRO has launched French Spot satellites on PSLV satellite launch vehicles, under commercial launch service agreement between Antrix Corporation Limited, the commercial arm of ISRO, and Astrium-Shash, a company under EADS. France. Two advanced remote sensing Spot satellites were successfully launched in 2013 and AMP 2014 on board ISRO's Polar satellite launch vehicle. Aerospace, based at France, has been the major provider of launch services to Indian geostationary satellites. Subsequent to the launch of Apple's satellite, 18 Indian satellites have been launched by Aerospace. On the 7th of December 2014, GSAT-16 communications satellite was launched successfully on board an Ariane 5 launcher from Kourou, French Guiana. Civil nuclear energy. A landmark framework agreement on civil nuclear cooperation was signed between India and France on the 30th of September 2008 during the visit of Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh to France. Subsequently, during the visit of President Nicolas Sarkozy to India from 4 to 7 December 2010, the General Framework Agreement and the Early Works Agreement between NPCIL and Areva for implementation of EPR-NPP units at Jatapur were signed. Healthcare. Several French firms are active in the life sciences and Medicare sector. In February 2015, William Hazeltine, president of Access Health International and a former professor at Harvard Medical School, opined that French healthcare was the best in the world, surpassing even Singapore. Indian life insurance market is the fastest growing in the world and the seventh largest. Education. Indians spend 7.5% of household income on education. Campus. France. India. A student recruitment initiative of the French Embassy in India is showcasing France as an education destination for Indian students. From 1 to the 7th of October 2015, representatives of French universities and visa offices will travel to Bangalore, Chennai, Pune and Kochi for a course opportunities and visa guidance roadshow. French government is offering 5-year visas to encourage more Indian students to study in France and allowing students who have completed their studies in France an extra year to look for employment within the sector. In 2014, France hosted 3,000 Indian students, many of whom were provided full scholarships covering costs of education and allowance for boarding, lodging and air travel. The low costs of high-quality education has made France the third most preferred destination worldwide for international students.